Hey everybody, we're live and waiting for this press conference to start regarding findings of the East Oakland Stadium Alliance poll. Press conference to start regarding findings of the East Oakland Stadium Alliance poll.
The host has connected you to the call.
Let me know when everyone's in.
Line muted.
Okay. Hi there. Well, we have most of those who have RSVP'd, so we're just going to get started because I know everyone's got a lot going on. My name is Marika Rippes, and I want to thank everyone for joining this morning and also for your interest in the results of a recent survey of Oakland voters, which asked 800 Oakland voters for their thoughts on a couple of important questions relating to the financing plan for the A's Howard Terminal project. Two questions drove the survey. Do you support requiring a full independent public analysis before any deal to the A's proposed development is approved, as requested by Councilmember Gallo, who is on this call? And do you support a public vote on the use of taxpayer dollars to support the A's development, a concept proposed by Councilmember Fife? Here today to give an overview of the survey and its findings is Dave Tollefson, who is Vice President of the Melman Group, and they are the firm that did this polling. They're a very well-established polling firm. Also joining us to provide some perspective on the Oakland community's position on these issues is Councilmember Noel Gallo, Port of Oakland longshoreman Melvin McKay, and West Oakland community member and tenant organizer James Van. We'll kick off first with a short presentation from Dave Torlakson. All of you should have received a memo this morning when you got your dial-in information for this call. So you have the top line on this, and Dave's going to explain a little more, give a little more depth what the findings of the poll revealed. And then we're going to open up to questions from you. You can raise your hand by dialing 5-star, and that's 5-star to raise your hand, and then we'll
Hand raised.
you can ask questions after Dave has done his presentation and direct it to any of the participants on the call. As I anticipate, for those of you who are visual TV stations, namely who are calling in right now and would like to do a Zoom interview, the participants are also available, and we can arrange that, immediately following the call if you'd like. So just reach out to us, and we can put you in touch with any of the participants that are happy to do interviews. And if you're interested in going over to Howard Terminal, Melvin McKay is actually there. That's where he works. So he's over at Howard Terminal if you would like to get that sort of a visual system interview. So thank you so much, and I'll hand it over to Dave.
Great, thanks. So let me tell you a little bit about how we conducted the poll before we get into the results. So it is a survey of 800 voters in the city of Oakland, representing the likely November electorate. These interviews were conducted March 31st to April 6th, so very recent. It used, we called cell phones, we called landlines, we used text online interviews, the whole panoply to make sure that we got a representative sample of Oakland voters. 800 sample is robust. The margin of error for the overall results is plus or minus 3.5 percentage points. A 95% level of confidence. And anytime we talk about any subgroups, anything that isn't overall results by gender or anything like that, the margin of error is higher on those numbers. So with that methodology, let me dive into these results, which are very clear. Over three quarters, 76% want any deal that has to do with public funds to support an Oakland Days development on the ballot. And that support stretches across age, gender, education, ethnicity, sexual orientation, geography. Over 70% in all of those definitions want any deal on the ballot so that they have the opportunity to vote on this. There's also intense desire for this. It's not just that 76% want this on the ballot, 63% strongly want this on the ballot. These are very overwhelming numbers. Only 15% said no, and 9% were unsure. So an overwhelming percentage. 76%, even self-identified baseball fans, 76% of them want any deal with using public funds to be on the ballot so that they can vote on it themselves. What's also clear is that they want a full, independent, public financial analysis before any deal is agreed to. That's 85% of Oakland voters want that full, independent, public financial analysis before any deal is agreed to. Only 8% oppose that requirement, 7% unsure. And similarly, over 75% across age, gender, education, ethnicity, geography, want that financial analysis, public, independent financial analysis conducted before any deal is agreed to. And that's including 85% of baseball fans, so the people who are most interested in possibly in this kind of development. They want this full, independent public analysis. So these two questions make it very clear voters want the opportunity to vote on any deal that uses public funds to support a development for the A's, and they want a full, independent public fiscal analysis conducted before any deal is agreed to.
Conference recording started.
So with that, I will pick it over.
You want to, we have if someone has raised their hand. Is it Vinny?
Yes, how are you?
Great. Vinny, we're going to unmute you, and you can direct your question to Dave or any of the participants.
Line unmuted.
Yeah, thank you very much. My question is that given the fact that there is no financial plan for Howard Terminal, let me be more brief and specific. doesn't matter if you use SB 1083 Skinner or the original Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District Law, SB 628 Beal from 1985, 2015, excuse me. The fact of the matter is that there has been no creation of an Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District signed into law by the City Council. There's been no bylaw creation of a public financing authority, which is what the law calls for. And I think more important to what Councilman Regallo is calling for, there has been no creation of an infrastructure financing plan, which would be the financing plan you're talking about. It's going to take another roughly 7 months to get there, if not leading us into next year. So my point is this: why not just get city staff to nail all of this down, because they haven't and they've wasted 2 years on it, and really understand the project before you take it to the public? Because if you actually sit down and do the calculations, I have had 33 years experience in taxing and financing calculations. The money is there to pay for what the community wanted in their meetings. All right. This project has been handled so terribly. Well, I'm wondering why you're doing this right now. Thank you.
Line muted.
So Vinny, Councilmember Gallo, would you like to address that question? And we can also circle back with you, Vinny, because there were so many, interesting and obviously are very knowledgeable about public financing. So we can certainly circle back with you after this call to delve into that in more detail with you.
Sure thing.
Sure. Do you want me to respond now, or?
Yeah, sure. If you want to respond now, and then we can follow up with Mr. Abraham after the call.
Sure, we can follow up after the call. But the reality is in terms of, and I'm bringing this at the request of residents that are burdened by not only the pandemic, but in terms of the taxation that's occurring here in the city of Oakland. And certainly we have many emergencies, but at the same time, we also have a property we call the Coliseum, where, we're looking at 155 acres that's available, that has a stadium, that the A's own half of it, that all the infrastructure and environmental is currently in place, and certainly the city of Oakland owns the other half of those 155 acres. And we're willing, we're looking to reach out to work together. But at the end of the day, what is the best investment for the resident, considering the emergencies that I have, and from repaving the streets, making them safe, to additional work crews to maintain the cleanliness and the safety that our children deserve to go to attend school. And so that's, for me, that's the bottom line, to be able to receive a clear presentation to the full council by the Oakland A's directly and the city staff in terms of what is the true financial cost, obligations, because to this day we have not received that. And we had the experience with the Raiders and the Warriors, and believe me, I'm still paying for that activity, even though they're not here. And that's what the residents are calling me, at least the residents that are involved in my district with me. I do want the A's to stay in Oakland, but at the same time, I need to be able to provide a clear financial picture. And as a matter of fact, tomorrow at the City Council, through the Rules Committee, once more, we're going to be requesting to retain the services of an independent outside consultant to perform a cost-benefit analysis of financial issues related to the Oakland A's, proposed building of the new baseball stadium, and the mixed-use development at Howard Terminal, and schedule a workshop to the City Council through a public meeting that all of us can listen to, ask questions, and get the same information. And that is to do a cost-benefit analysis of the financial obligations related to this project, not just today, but after the project is built, then who is responsible for any cost overruns, who is responsible for the maintenance, public safety, and all the obligations that the City of Oakland taxpayers had to pay the current projects that we had here. And so that's the information that I am seeking, and the public is entitled to that. Thank you.
Yeah, this is James Van. I'd like to compliment Councilmember Gallo on his answer and maybe add a comment, please. James Van from Oakland Tennis Union. There is also in the city of Oakland a history related to financing of projects and development, where every project that the city has to put money into at least doubles the budget by the time the project is done. All of the estimates are low, and the amount that's actually spent always turns out to be double, even though the city may have not to exceed contracts. The developers and contractors always come back with requests for additional money needed to complete the project. So I think if the city, the community wants and needs to know up front what is the obligation that the city is committing itself to over the years on these projects. And further, the community would like that responsibility of paying for such a study to be paid for by the A's. Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any other questions from media on this call? If so, please raise your hand with a 5-star.
Hand raised.
Mr. Abraham has his hand raised again. Zenny, we can certainly take one more question from you, and then we're happy to follow up after the call with, as I said, with some more specifics to your more in-depth.
Line unmuted.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. And hey, Jim, how you doing, Mr. Van? And Noel, hey, are you all aware that Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District law says in black and white that the district that is designed and not the city is responsible for the payment of bond issues? Because there's been a lot of discussion around the city and the city and the city. And, staff has had 2 years to brief you all on this, actually over that. And it's clear to me that no one's done that, but it's right there in black and white. And other cities like Sacramento are doing this. So are you all aware of this language? Thank you.
Line muted.
Maybe Councilmember Gallo can answer, but I'm not aware that the EIFC, the financing district, has actually been formed. And I know the county was asked if they would be willing to, and I think the county indicated consent, but I don't know that the city itself has acted on that question.
Yeah, and I don't have that information, and certainly this is what we're trying to get. Get a full presentation. What the city will clearly be liable, responsible today and in the future, and that hasn't clearly been demonstrated. There are many maybe so ifs involved, and including one is what will be the relationship of the Port of Oakland that I haven't lived here in Oakland all my life. I have never seen the Port of Oakland so active in terms of creating employment opportunities, the businesses growing, finally utilizing the Port of Oakland land that's there. And I would like to see that continue to grow because, the majority of people that are being hired at the Port of Oakland today are from Oakland. And so I support that effort and want to continue to build. But in terms of, that's one of the reasons why we're asking for a presentation to the public where the Oakland A's have to be present to help deliver that presentation and their commitment, and as well as city staff with information. And that's the part that's missing. Some of it is done behind closed doors. Some of us get one set of information and the other group gets another set of information. and we just need to be upfront. I do want the A's to stay in Oakland, but I was selected by the people of Oakland to represent them, and we need to be responsive to the citizens of Oakland. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Vinny. I think those are our questions. As I had offered earlier, if anybody would like to, or any member of the broadcast media would like to, do a more of a visual Zoom type interview with any of the participants today, please call me at 916-601-9737, or the number that was on the materials we sent you earlier. You could also reach out to my colleague Emily, whose name was on that, and we are happy to connect you with any of those who spoke today. So thank you everyone for your time, and we appreciate the participants and members of the media who joined and have an interest in this important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right.
So that's it, folks. As you can see, I believe I sound like I was the only media member there. I'm the only person that was on the call. Wow. This is demonstrative, of what I've said all along, that the city does not understand or have sources and uses for the project to inform the athletics, which has been the frustration Dave Cavall has expressed again and again and again. And now, because Howard Terminal's been in the public eye for an increased level, now the public wants to weigh in on something that the public doesn't really understand at all. And I understand why, because we're in the middle of a pandemic and a lot of people don't have money, and people are just fighting to keep a roof over their heads. But the importance of this project to that, for me, is from an entirely other direction. The city does not understand how to activate laws before it just to get money to renters to keep their places in Oakland. For example, the same enhanced infrastructure financing district law that I referred to is in the form of a legislation passed last year called AB 464 Mullen. It uses enhanced infrastructure financing district legislation and says that you can establish a tax increment financing zone of the type that's proposed for Howard Terminal, specifically to steer property tax money to small businesses that have been negatively harmed by the pandemic. That is in black and white. And yet it's been, almost a year come June. The city's done nothing. Nothing. And you have people like Councilmember Carol Fife, best known for Moms for Housing, who, if she knew the law and understood legislation already passed, would implement an EIFD for West Oakland, have a plan that activates the Polanco Act, and start acquiring homes, that are in areas that have not been sufficiently environmentally cleaned up, but occupied, and help clean up those homes, and where they are behind in rent or mortgage, help them get monetary relief, because the city would have acquired them under the Polanco Act. All right, that's something that, if she knew the law, could have been done a long time ago. What's going on is we have a class of politicians who want to be activists, but they don't want to understand government. And the reason why I keep pushing this is because The road to nirvana is already written in black and white. It's already written in the legislation. All you got to do is read it and then implement it. And no councilman has done that. Shang Tao's taking a stab at it this May. But from what I understand, she's going to look only at affordable housing and infrastructure. Well, what about getting money to businesses, including those that have closed, because they've lost revenue because of the pandemic and they were forced to close? The businesses ought to be suing the city and the state under this legislation, saying, hey, look, you have this legislation. You can make sure we're paid back for closing. And they can. The city can engineer that through AB 464. You hear what I'm saying? Okay. So the city of Oakland's activity has been tragically bad. And I don't care how someone feels about me, I'll tell you what's not going to change. The legislation and math. Those are the two things that are on my side. Legislation and the math. Oh, and the fact that the city hasn't implemented the legislation or done the math. Okay. These are huge problems. I started working for the city of Oakland in 1986 as an intern. In those days, the city knew how to do things, but so did governments. In fact, let me give you a stark difference between how we handle the coronavirus today from a standpoint of helping business and how we would have handled it when I was intern in economic development in 1986, then hired officially in 87, because in 86 I was still in grad school, and then at Cal, and then retained as a consultant the next year because I built a giant economic model. Let me explain to you the difference between that time and now. Then the federal government would have created a huge block grant program for business, and the cities would have implemented that program to get money to business owners locally. That's what we would have done then. But now we say we'll give it to Bank of America and Chase and let them handle it. So they end up twisting the program to make money from loans that are supposed to be forgiven. And so what they do is they figure out all these different ways to say, well, okay, we can't forgive it for this reason. That would not have happened at all if the city, a nonprofit, were given the money and the instructions to set up the organizations to do it. That's called making government work. We don't make government work anymore. We toss everything to the private sector and we say, let the private sector do it. And I ask you one question. Has it made society better? If you ask me, the answer is no. We have a greater have versus have not split. We have homeless numbers that are unbelievable. And yet we have the stupidity that because, and it is really that because a person's a billionaire, they should be made to spend a huge amount of money on a project like affordable housing that by its design doesn't pencil out. That's why we have had these huge subsidy programs for decades, folks. You cannot force affordable housing automatically. You can't just wave a magic wand and say, you will pay for yourself. It takes a subsidy. It is subsidized housing. Why? Because the material costs force you into a certain cost level that you have to get back in terms of revenue from the rents that make your units and your facility unaffordable unless you have the subsidy to make up the gap difference. Okay? That's why. That's why. That's why. We've done it for years. What's going on is we have a society now that doesn't get that logic. They're into what I call the jealous logic. That is, you have a lot of money and I don't, therefore you pay for it. That you have a money and I don't, the money and I don't is market failure. right? Government is supposed to correct the market failure. We're not making government do that by providing subsidies for affordable housing and directives for the construction of affordable housing. We're not doing it by helping businesses that have closed to come back. We have a media that talks about the next restaurant that opened, but hey, what about the ones that have closed that we don't know about? What about the ones that we closed that, are black owned in black neighborhoods? Not just the ones that are in, Rockridge in Oakland, for example. You get the picture? I mean, at some point we need to stop kidding ourselves and we understand what's going on, because we don't. What's really going on is this fight where someone who has a little bit of money to influence opinion spends that money to do it, but it happens to be in a way that harms those who do not. That's where we're at. And we've tried to cut government out of the picture. Do you disagree? Okay, then explain the Trump-driven response, because it did start with Trump, where the Small Business Administration, where the Small Business Administration jumped in, and the Small Business Administration said, well, we'll just basically be a slave to the banks, because that's what's happened. Let me get your comments here. Corey says, I wonder if the AAC is taking notes from all this. They ought to be. Says, Zinni, you keep telling them, they keep talking about, they don't know about it. Their ignorance is going to make us lose this project. Thank you. Because I'm not saying anything that, points to me having antlers coming out of my head or something made up whole cloth. I'm talking about basic legislation that's on the books. You all have seen it, and math that anybody can do and is done around the country. Have doubts? Check out New York legislature tax increment financing. You'll find the law that permits tax increment financing to be used, and they have their own specific design. You know what's cool about the New York version of tax increment financing? They can artificially inflate the land at 6% per year. Imagine if we could do that in Oakland. 6% per year? Are you kidding me? That means you could, that means that in Howard term parlance, if you were able to artificially inflate $2 billion of assessed value north, 6% per year, you would be looking at $4 billion. $4 billion of tax increment financing revenue that you could cut in half, say, I'll take $2 billion, float a bond issue of $2 billion off that. Off the government just saying, okay, just tack on 6% each year. Writing a check. Right now, ours is at 2%. New York, you can do it at 6%. So all those people worrying about their ability to pay for, Buffalo Bills Stadium, no problem. This is legislation on the books. That's what I'm talking about, folks. Timothy Lee says, I wonder the same too. Thanks. So anyway, folks, I've got to call them back, and thank you for listening along with me. And subscribe to Zinni62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com.